Glyphosate is one of the most popular herbicides in the world, and certainly in the UK. It was first made in the 1970s by a company called Monsanto, sold as Roundup, but the company has since been bought out by Bayer. It works by inhibiting an enzyme in the actively grown part of the plant, which makes the leaves dry up and the plant subsequently dies. It is used by farmers before their crops appear to achieve a weed-free soil so that the growing plants have no competition from weeds, and before harvest to dry out the leaves in the crops to make harvest easier and to reduce costs associated with drying. It is also used in schools, parks and railways to remove the weeds. In 2017, the company lost a 20-year relicense application in the EU following a petition, but instead were granted a 5-year license. Despite this, there are a variety of bans, restrictions and recommendations to reduce the use of glyphosate in place both between and within countries of the EU and around the world. So in a world with year-on-year increasing food production needs and urbanisation, why is there such a diversity in recommendations for use? Let's look at some of the factors behind this. There have been various findings related to cancer. In 2015, the European Food Safety Authority concluded that glyphosate is unlikely to be carcinogenic. However, the World Health Organization in the same year concluded that it was a probable carcinogen in humans. There was a noteworthy case in which a worker with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma who had been spraying the herbicide received a court payout from the company on a causative basis. The reason for the opposing opinions is that the studies behind the findings are limited, and there are very few independent studies, most being conducted by industry. To add to this, weeds are developing resistance to glyphosate, driven by selection pressure. They acquire genes, which means they are not susceptible to the herbicide. This means that it is used in larger amounts to achieve the same effect. In addition, the amounts of use around the world vary wildly. The active ingredient is also mixed with other chemicals which potentially make it more toxic. These act as confounders and act to further muddy the waters and add to a lack of decisive evidence. There is debate about the toxicity to aquatic life. The evidence is fairly conclusive that it's harmful to amphibians, which is probably due to them living in relatively shallow pools of water in which runoff can accumulate and reach higher levels. However, the risk to fish, for example, is less clear. Use in parks, playgrounds and railways can reasonably be reduced by using physical methods of weed removal and by the use of buildings methods, such as employing cement instead of sand, for example, where weeds might be expected to grow between paving stones. There are some environmental friendly cements around. However, these alternatives come at a potential cost. Not insignificant is the administration cost around the decision to employ alternatives and to monitor their effectiveness. There is a debate about the effectiveness of the herbicide itself, with some growers' representatives claiming that it dries out crops, which are sold by weight and therefore reduces their yield and therefore profit, and that reducing weeds actually has no discernible advantage. Balancing the need for food production and convenient weed reduction for an urbanizing world is tricky. Until more high-quality independent studies are conducted, it is easy to see why the EU took a fairly sit-on-the-fence approach to a relicense agreement.